Ladies and gentlemen, today we tackle the great mystery. Why is America openly supporting Pakistan against India? Now, on the face of it, this seems odd. India's got the economy, the tech hubs, the Bollywood films. Pakistan's got, well, cricket and some fairly alarming neighbours. But America, bless it, always loves an underdog, especially if that underdog happens to have nuclear weapons. You see, US foreign policy isn't written in the stars, it's scribbled on the back of a napkin somewhere in Washington. And on that napkin are 3 words. What's useful now? Pakistan has been useful for decades. A gateway to Afghanistan, a handy military ally, and the place where the US likes to say it's fighting terrorism, while simultaneously sending Pakistan money that mysteriously buys a lot of new jets. Meanwhile, India plays hard to get. Washington says, don't buy oil from Russia, and India says thanks, but petrol's cheaper over there. It's like America's dating someone who keeps texting their ex. Annoying, but you can't dump them because they're also hosting the world's biggest IT support. Then there's the balance of power issue. The US doesn't want South Asia looking too lopsided, so they keep Pakistan in the game. Think of it like a reality TV show. You don't want one contestant winning too early. You keep handing out roses so the plot stays spicy. And finally, America loves optics. Nothing says global superpower like wading into a fight you don't fully understand and pretending you're the referee. Never mind that both teams ignore the referee half the time. So why is America supporting Pakistan against India? Because geopolitics is less about friendship and more about theatre. And in this show, America's decided it's the star. Everyone else? Just guest appearances. When it comes to America's relationship with Pakistan, the word that best sums it up is convenience. Not friendship, not loyalty, not even strategy in the grand classical sense, just pure opportunistic convenience. The sort of convenience you get when you suddenly remember the local takeaway does free delivery, so you start praising it as essential to your lifestyle. America has often treated Pakistan in precisely that way. It isn't about deep affection, it's about what role Pakistan plays on the world stage at a given moment, and how neatly it fits into America's ongoing obsession with keeping its own interests polished and primed. Think back to the Cold War era, when America was locked in its eternal arm wrestling match with the Soviet Union. India, despite being a democracy, was stubbornly non-aligned and leaned rather heavily towards Moscow in terms of defense purchases and rhetoric. Washington found that terribly inconvenient, so what did it do? It turned to Pakistan, which was more than happy to present itself as a frontline state against communism, a loyal partner in containing Soviet influence. In exchange, Pakistan got American weapons, aid, and the political equivalent of a warm hug. Geopolitical convenience at its finest. India was the awkward teenager refusing to play ball, so America went and befriended the rebellious neighbour instead. Fast forward to the 1980s, and the script became even clearer. With the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Pakistan suddenly became indispensable to Washington. The CIA funneled money, weapons, and, let's not forget, training through Pakistan to support Afghan Mujahideen fighters. Conveniently, Pakistan became America's middleman in one of the biggest proxy battles of the 20th century. Never mind that the long-term consequences of this arrangement would eventually circle back in ways no one cared to predict at the time. The priority was simple. Pakistan provided location, networks, and plausible deniability, and America in return showered it with aid and praise. After 9/11, Pakistan once again slipped into the role of convenient partner. Washington declared a global war on terror, and Pakistan sitting next door to Afghanistan became the perfect launch pad for US operations. The irony, of course, is that some of the very networks America wanted dismantled were thriving within Pakistan's borders. But geopolitical convenience is rarely about consistency, it's about access. America needed bases, intelligence, and supply routes, and Pakistan was the only country willing, or at least pretending to be willing, to provide them. Cue another round of financial aid, diplomatic support, and the odd public scolding that never really changed the underlying relationship. Meanwhile, India was becoming less convenient. Yes, it had a booming economy and a growing IT sector that Silicon Valley adored, but it was also charting its own path on the global stage. India bought weapons from Russia, refused to always vote with America at the United Nations, and had a foreign policy that often sounded like, thanks for the advice, but we'll do it our way. For Washington, this was frustrating. America likes partners who nod, agree, and ideally buy a few fighter jets along the way. India's independent streak, while admirable in its own right, meant it was a less pliable ally compared to Pakistan, which was much more open to transactional arrangements. Geopolitical convenience also plays into the simple matter of geography. Pakistan's location, wedged between Iran, Afghanistan, China, and India, makes it a natural chess piece in America's broader game of influence. You can't run supply lines into Afghanistan without it. You can't keep an eye on Iran without being near it. You can't think about containing China without glancing across Pakistan's territory. It's like a piece on the board that isn't especially powerful by itself, but happens to sit on a square that everyone else needs to pass through. That square becomes vital, not because of what it is, but because of where it is. And so America keeps finding itself returning to Pakistan like someone who swears they'll never go back to a dodgy mechanic, only to remember that it's the only garage open past midnight. The relationship isn't romantic, it isn't stable, and it certainly isn't built on trust. It's built on utility, and in international politics, utility often outweighs everything else. Values, democracy, even human rights records. If a partner is useful, then the partner is supported, at least until the next convenient option comes along. When America looks at Pakistan, it doesn't just see a country, it sees a giant military filing cabinet, conveniently placed in South Asia, where all the folders labeled security interests can be stored and retrieved at will. America's relationship with Pakistan has always had this military undercurrent, like a soundtrack that keeps playing in the background even when the dialogue suggests otherwise. On the surface, it's about diplomacy, democracy, and shared values, but scratch a little deeper and it's really about tanks, jets, bases, and the occasional war on terror rebrand. To begin with, Pakistan's army isn't just an army, it's practically the country's most powerful institution. America noticed that very early on. While India was happily lecturing the world about non-alignment and running elections that looked a bit too independent for Washington's taste, Pakistan was run by generals who spoke the international language of uniforms, salutes, and yes, sir. That made conversations a lot smoother. America has always found it easier to strike deals with military regimes than with argumentative parliaments. So when Pakistan's military came knocking, Washington opened the door, often with a care package of weapons and aid. Now consider the post-9/11 period, where Pakistan's military suddenly became America's favourite phone number on speed dial. Afghanistan was the immediate battleground, but Pakistan was the neighbour with all the keys. Drone bases? Ask Pakistan. Ground supply routes? Pakistan again. Intelligence cooperation, or at least the performance of it? Pakistan. For the Pentagon, it was like having an all-inclusive security package in the region. Of course, the catch was that Pakistan's security services were often accused of playing a double game, fighting terrorism on one hand, while allegedly keeping ties with groups America was trying to eliminate on the other. But Washington, being Washington, chose to quietly ignore this as long as supply trucks kept rolling and drones kept flying. It's a bit like hiring a security guard who occasionally leaves the back door open, but still remembers to switch the lights on. There's also the nuclear factor, the ultimate reason America can't afford to ignore Pakistan militarily. Pakistan is not just a country with an army, it's a nuclear-armed country with an army. That changes the stakes entirely. Washington knows that instability in Pakistan could mean instability in how those weapons are managed, and so the military relationship isn't just about cooperation, it's also about containment. Billions of dollars in aid have flowed under the polite label of military assistance, but much of it has been aimed at keeping the Pakistani armed forces well supplied, disciplined, and crucially, talking to the Americans rather than shutting them out. Another layer of military and security interest comes from Pakistan's geography. You couldn't ask for a better staging ground if you're the United States. To the west, Afghanistan and Iran. To the north, China. To the east, India. It's like buying a house and realizing it comes with a view of every single neighbor you're slightly suspicious of. For America, Pakistan provides logistical routes into Afghanistan, listening posts near Iran, and an eye into China's expanding influence. No wonder American military planners keep circling back to Islamabad, however frustrating the partnership may be. Then there's the defense trade itself. America's military-industrial complex isn't exactly shy about selling hardware, and Pakistan has long been a loyal customer. From F-16 fighter jets to advanced weaponry, the sales have not only strengthened Pakistan's military, but also kept it locked into a system where maintenance, upgrades and training flow straight from the US. It's a business relationship disguised as strategic cooperation. Washington gets money, influence and long-term dependence, while Pakistan gets shiny new toys to parade on national days. The intelligence sharing arrangement deserves a mention too, even if it often resembled a one-sided confession. America relied heavily on Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence ISI agency to track militant networks, even while suspecting that parts of the ISI were, let's say, less than fully enthusiastic about dismantling them. Still, in the murky world of espionage, half information was better than no information, and America preferred to keep Pakistan inside the circle rather than outside throwing rocks at it. In short, military and security interests have always been the glue holding this uneasy relationship together. America may frown at Pakistan's politics, grimace at its inconsistencies, and occasionally shout about democracy, but when it comes to bases, supply lines, and nuclear stability, the military bond is the one card too important to discard. One of the trickiest things for America to deal with is that India, unlike many of Washington's other partners, insists on being its own boss. This independence in policy makes India the friend who turns up to your dinner party but refuses to eat what you've cooked, instead bringing their own takeaway. Everyone else at the table is nodding politely while you carve up the turkey, and then there's India with a biryani and a fork, perfectly happy to eat solo. It's not that India dislikes America, it's that India doesn't like being told what to do, and that can be infuriating for a country like the United States, which has built a whole foreign policy around giving instructions and expecting everyone else to nod enthusiastically. India's independent streak has roots that go back to the days of Jawaharlal Nehru and the policy of non-alignment during the Cold War. While most nations were busy picking sides, lining up behind Washington or Moscow like children in a playground choosing football teams, India stood there saying, "We'll play our own game, thank you very much." It wasn't isolationist, it wasn't passive, it was simply India deciding that its sovereignty wasn't up for bargaining chips. That tradition continues today, though it has swapped its Cold War vocabulary for modern strategic autonomy. The most glaring example of this independence is India's relationship with Russia. For decades, India has relied on Russian defense equipment, from tanks to fighter jets to submarines. Even today, despite America's disapproval, India continues to purchase Russian oil at a discount because, let's be honest, cheap fuel is hard to turn down. Washington scolds, raises eyebrows, and threatens sanctions, but India shrugs. For Indian policymakers, the calculation is straightforward: national interest trumps foreign lectures. That's not disobedience, it's pragmatism. But in Washington, where compliance is often mistaken for friendship, India's stance looks like stubbornness. Trade is another area where India refuses to play by America's script. Washington likes free markets when they benefit American exports, but India protects its industries with tariffs, subsidies, and a healthy suspicion of opening the floodgates to foreign goods. For Indian leaders, this is about safeguarding farmers, workers, and domestic companies. For America, it's about frustration. Negotiations on trade deals often resemble a tug of war, with India digging its heels in and America trying to pull harder. And, more often than not, India simply refuses to budge. Then there's the diplomatic theatre. India has consistently charted its own course at international forums, whether it's climate change, the United Nations, or conflicts in other regions. It doesn't automatically side with the US, nor does it parrot Russia or China. Instead, it crafts its own position, carefully calibrated to protect national interests. This often means India abstains from votes that America wants it to support, or issues statements that sound suspiciously neutral when Washington would prefer bold condemnation. To US officials, this independence feels like awkward fence-sitting. To India, it's called not being anyone's pawn. Perhaps most irritating to Washington is that India has options. Unlike many smaller nations that depend heavily on American aid or military backing, India has built relationships in multiple directions, with Europe, with the Middle East, with Russia, and increasingly, even with East Asia. This means it doesn't have to put all its eggs in the American basket. America can't use the usual carrot and stick approach as easily because India has plenty of carrots of its own and isn't particularly frightened by sticks. What complicates matters further is India's growing global confidence. As its economy rises and its diplomatic clout expands, India is no longer satisfied being called a regional power. It wants a seat at the big table, whether that's in the United Nations Security Council or in shaping global trade rules. This ambition makes it even less likely to follow Washington's lead unquestioningly. If anything, India often signals that partnership with America is welcome, but only as long as it's a partnership of equals, not one of instructions and obedience. This independent policy stance creates a strange paradox. America needs India as a counterbalance to China, admires its democratic credentials, and values its market. But at the same time, India's refusal to be a predictable ally drives Washington toward Pakistan, which, despite all its double games, tends to nod a bit more readily when America comes knocking. In short, India's independence is both its strength and America's irritation. If international politics were a board game, it wouldn't be Monopoly or Risk. It'd be something far more confusing, with half the rules missing, the dice borrowed from another set, and a referee who insists on changing the rules mid-game. In South Asia, America has long played the role of the referee who also happens to own half the pieces and the board itself. The key to keeping this chaotic game going is balance, making sure no single player gets too powerful, too dominant, or too smug. And in this particular round, America's balancing act involves tilting ever so slightly toward Pakistan whenever India looks like it's getting too far ahead. For decades, Washington's approach has been to keep India and Pakistan from settling into a comfortable hierarchy. India is the bigger economy, the more stable democracy, and the rising global power, which in theory makes it the natural favorite. But if America were to lean entirely toward India, the fear in Washington is that Pakistan might spin out of control, destabilize the region, and create an even bigger headache. So, like a teacher who insists on giving a bit of extra attention to the troublesome student in class, America often directs support toward Pakistan, not because it prefers Pakistan, but because it wants to keep the game level enough to prevent chaos. The Cold War highlighted this balancing act in sharp colors. India leaned toward Moscow, which automatically made Pakistan the US's chosen partner. This wasn't about love or loyalty, it was about making sure the Soviets didn't get too comfortable in the region. If India was going to buy MEGs and T-72 seconds, then Washington would happily supply Pakistan with F-16 seconds and financial aid. One side stacks up red blocks, the other stacks up blue, balance maintained at least for the time being. But even after the Cold War ended, the logic didn't disappear. In fact, it deepened. India's rise in the 21st century, with its booming economy and expanding influence, has been welcomed by America, but not without some side-eye. Washington wants India strong enough to counterbalance China, but not so strong that it starts calling all the shots in South Asia. That's where Pakistan comes in handy. By supporting Pakistan militarily, financially, or diplomatically, America ensures that India always has to look over its shoulder. It's a way of reminding New Delhi that it isn't the only contestant on the stage. The irony is that Pakistan itself often relies on this dynamic. Islamabad knows that America doesn't want the region to tilt completely toward India, so it positions itself as indispensable, whether through military cooperation, intelligence sharing, or simply pointing out its geographical importance. Pakistan plays up its role in the balancing act. And Washington, with one eye on stability and the other on its own interests, usually plays along. The result is a peculiar relationship where both sides know the rules but pretend they don't. At its core, the balance of power game is about control. America doesn't want either India or Pakistan to feel invincible. India might be the economic giant, but a confident, unchecked India could one day refuse to align with American interests altogether. Pakistan, on the other hand, might be weaker economically, but it has nuclear weapons and a knack for creating geopolitical drama. Too much instability in Islamabad and the balance tips the other way. So Washington keeps both countries within reach, ensuring neither drifts too far from its orbit. The balancing act also serves America's global image. By appearing to mediate between two rivals, the US presents itself as the indispensable global player, the power without whom nothing in the region can move forward. It's not just about South Asia, it's about reinforcing the narrative that America is still the world's ultimate broker. If Washington were to let India dominate or Pakistan collapse, it would lose not only influence in the region, but also its ability to set the tone internationally. In this sense, supporting Pakistan against India isn't about taking sides, it's about keeping the game interesting. Because in geopolitics, just like on a reality TV show, if one contestant becomes too dominant, the whole season risks being cut short. And America, above all, loves a long-running series. America has always loved optics, not the physics classroom kind with lenses and prisms, but the political kind where appearances matter far more than the messy reality underneath. In South Asia, the diplomatic theatre between India and Pakistan provides a perfect stage for Washington to flex this skill. Supporting Pakistan, or at least appearing to, is often less about hard strategy and more about the image America wants to project, that of the wise referee, the indispensable mediator, the global policeman who turns up just in time to stop the neighbors from setting fire to each other's fences. Whether anyone actually listens to the referee is another question entirely, but that hardly matters for the cameras. Optics are all about perception. America knows that openly siding with India, the bigger and more powerful neighbor, would make it look biased and heavy-handed. So instead, it tries to maintain the illusion of fairness by throwing Pakistan the occasional bone, whether in the form of military aid, public praise, or diplomatic sympathy. The idea is to show the world that Washington isn't playing favorites, even though its long-term interests may lean toward India's growing economy and influence. Think of it like a teacher who, while secretly admiring the star pupil, spends a little extra time helping the student at the back of the class so no one can accuse them of favoritism. Diplomacy, too, thrives on appearances. America often makes a point of engaging with both sides whenever India and Pakistan flare up over Kashmir, cross-border attacks, or diplomatic spats. In practice, Washington's involvement rarely changes the fundamentals. These are disputes rooted in decades of history, but what matters is that America can appear on the news cycle as the responsible adult in the room. That image is valuable, both domestically, where it reassures voters that America is still in charge of global affairs, and internationally, where it reinforces the idea that no serious conflict can be managed without US input. There's also the delicate matter of global consistency. America likes to talk about supporting democracy, sovereignty, and human rights, but Pakistan's record in those areas has been, let's say, complicated. So why support it? Because diplomacy is less about values and more about optics. By maintaining ties with Islamabad, America signals to the Muslim world that it is not exclusively in bed with India, which is often accused, rightly or wrongly, of oppressing its Muslim minority. This allows Washington to keep a foot in both camps, even if the balancing act sometimes looks more like an awkward dance routine. Optics also extend to America's relationships beyond South Asia. For example, China has been steadily deepening its ties with Pakistan through projects like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. If America were to abandon Pakistan completely, it would look like it had surrendered the country wholesale to Beijing. By continuing to offer support, however symbolic, Washington maintains the appearance of influence, even if much of the real ground is being covered by Chinese investments and infrastructure. It's less about controlling Pakistan and more about not being seen to lose Pakistan entirely. Another layer of diplomacy is the theatre of aid and assistance. Every time America announces a new package of financial or military support for Pakistan, it serves a dual purpose. On one hand, it reassures Islamabad that Washington hasn't forgotten about it. On the other, it sends a message to India that America has other options and that New Delhi cannot take US goodwill for granted. It's a classic diplomatic two-step: reward one partner while reminding the other not to get too comfortable. The actual impact of the aid might be limited, but the headlines it generates are invaluable. Optics give America a way to manage its own contradictions. Supporting India makes sense for long-term strategy, especially in balancing China. But supporting Pakistan makes sense for short-term stability and global image. By dabbling in both, America gets to maintain its favorite diplomatic pose, the indispensable power everyone must consult. It doesn't matter if the behind-the-scenes reality is messy, or if neither India nor Pakistan fully trusts Washington's motives. What matters is that, on the surface, America continues to look like the conductor of the orchestra, even if half the musicians are playing their own tunes. So why is America openly supporting Pakistan against India? Not because of love, not because of loyalty, and certainly not because it enjoys the region's endless headaches. It's because convenience, military needs, independence, balance, and optics all line up to make Pakistan the piece America can't quite afford to take off the board. Washington likes to play the game as though it's in charge, even when the dice keep rolling in unexpected directions. In the end, America's role is less of a steadfast friend and more of a restless chess player, shuffling pieces, changing strategies, and insisting that everyone believe it has a master plan. Whether that plan works is another matter entirely, but as long as the spotlight stays on, and as long as the applause doesn't stop, America is perfectly happy to keep acting as both referee and contestant in South Asia's longest-running match.